This is big breaking news. Multiple evacuation orders in multiple states have been issued in the United States of America. And this is a theme that we are seeing happen over and over and over. We are seeing toxic explosions, toxic chemicals being released into the environment, and they are so bad that they are causing evacuation orders in multiple states in the United States today. This is happening on top of all the other ones that we've been covering the past few months. So this is increasing in frequency. I've never seen this many shelter in place or evacuation orders issued in my life. And I've been into things like this, researching this for over a decade. And I have never seen this before in my life. And it is definitely increasing in frequency. So we need to be getting prepared. We need to have air filtration, water filtration. We need to have evacuation plans. We need to be ready because it can happen in your region at any moment. And now 2 different states on the same exact day are issuing evacuation orders and are also dealing with toxic chemical explosions. So let's get into the details here of this first one, and then we will get into the second one as well. And I wanted to hit really quick what's going on. I wanted to give an update on Ohio because this is extremely important, because this is the key to everything. Our water supply and our food supply is being poisoned with these attacks. Every single attack is more exposure to our food supply, to our water, to these toxic chemicals that are slowly killing us. Okay, this is happening in real time. In Ohio, they are even now measuring the plant tissue of the farms in this region that had a massive train derailment in East Palestine. They are now measuring the plant tissue, the Ohio Department of Ag, to make sure that there are not dioxins in this tissue. And they are only testing for very specific things as well. So they're admitting that there's a problem and they need to test for it, but they're also only testing for very specific chemicals that might not show up. And there could be other chemicals that appeared from these fires and explosions. Chemicals can change forms when they are exposed to heat or fire or pressure, and that is what happened with this vinyl chloride. A lot of it has become dioxins, which stay in the soil, stay in the environment for a very long time, and are very toxic and are even related to Agent Orange like chemicals. So Ohio was just the beginning, all right? And this was going on for months and months before that as well. I was covering stories even before Ohio, all right? But this one is the big one, and it's the model that we are going to see. And we are seeing a very similar event that happened just today as well in the US, and they're telling people to stay away. All right, so we will get into that in just a second. Another massive hazardous train derailment that caught on fire, exploded right near a lake and a river. We will get to all that in just a second, but I want to get to what's happening in Georgia first, because there was a massive chemical plant explosion in southern Georgia, right above the border, right above Jacksonville and right below Savannah, Georgia, on the coast here. And there was a massive chemical plant explosion, and something very suspicious is going on here, because this plant, all right, look at the date. This is from today, April 15th, 2023, and they are issuing evacuation orders for this. And how many are we going to see of this? But this plant already caught on fire and exploded in November last year. What is going on? How does this keep happening? So you can see here the date on this, November 7th, 2022, chemical plant fire and possibility of explosions prompt evacuation in Georgia. This was the same exact chemical plant that caught on fire just a few months ago, and now it caught on fire again in Georgia and is issuing evacuation orders in this region of Brunswick. So this is absolutely insane, and the cities of Jacksonville and Savannah are also at risk as well. And this is on top of the massive chemical explosion that we had in Indiana just a few days ago. I reported on this just a few days ago. There was a massive chemical explosion, probably 100 miles east of Indianapolis, and it caused evacuation orders as well because these toxic chemicals were raining down on people. People were reporting chunks of plastic raining down in their yard miles and miles away. All right, so these explosions are severe and they are affecting people much further than just the half mile. They're saying evacuate within a half mile. People were having massive plastic chunks raining down in their yard in Indiana, and we could have a very similar event happening in Georgia today as well. And how many times does this have to happen until there's some kind of investigation? All right, how many factories have exploded in the past 2 months? It has been insurmountable. It's hard to count how many there has been. It's hard to keep track. There was a chocolate factory that exploded, one of the worst ones, multiple casualties in Pennsylvania. There was a metal factory that exploded in Ohio. All right. There was another chemical factory that exploded in Ohio too that same exact week, and a Coca-Cola factory that exploded in Ohio. All within the same week this happened. Multiple factories exploded. I made a whole video on this. What are the odds that this keeps happening over and over? And how many points is this taking off our supply chain? All right. Even if it's 0.01% every single time, incrementalism, this adds up, and it is taking off little chunks out of our supply chain every single time, and it's poisoning little chunks of our farmland and of our communities and of our water every single time as well. And if you have dozens of these a month, it starts to add up fairly quickly, and the water starts getting poisoned all throughout the country, and the farmland and the air all throughout the country. So something bigger is definitely going on. If you are in this region of Georgia, you need to evacuate immediately. You do not want to be breathing in these toxic chemicals. We will get to this train derailment as well that spilled hazardous material and caught on fire, exploded. We will get to that in just a second because you need to hear about that. You might need to evacuate this region as well. But these chemicals that were in this plastic factory could cause multiple symptoms: drooling, eye pain, loss of vision, severe pain in the throat and mouth, severe pain or burning in the nose, eyes, ears, lips, or tongue, throat swelling, voice changes. And these chemicals are known carcinogens as well, which cause cancer. It's right there on California.gov's website. These epoxy resins that are used for plastic hardening are known carcinogens. And this is what this factory did. It was a plastic factory. They work with epoxies, work with resins, and these chemicals are what they are using, and they are known carcinogens being released onto the public, right? How many attacks do we have to have until there's a federal investigation? These could even potentially be cyber attacks on our factories as well. I keep reporting on all of these massive warnings we keep getting on cyber attacks, and it seems like these could be potential cyber attacks. They could hit certain valves, certain pressure systems that are controlled by computers, could potentially be accessed from the outside and cause failures and cause fires, cause explosions. That could have been what we've seen at this massive dairy factory as well, where we had 18,000 head of dairy cattle perish too. So why aren't these things being investigated? This is a national security risk, and it is not taken seriously. It is swept under the rug. And if you talk about things like this, they act like you are a crazy person, right? This is a real threat, and we need to be concerned why this is happening. Let's dive into what's also happening in Maine, all right? So multiple states are getting hit. This is Georgia. Florida needs to be on the radar as well. Jacksonville, Florida, and Savannah, Georgia. They need to all be on high alert because the wind could change and start blowing these toxic chemicals their way and literally blowing plastic chunks their way. But we also had a massive train derailment in Maine. So you can see here, this looks kind of like a familiar scene, okay? If you've seen any scenes from East Palestine, Ohio, this looks very familiar. We have a train derailment that is on fire, and they are saying it's holding hazardous chemicals And this, it just looks very familiar, and this is very scary for the state of Maine because they could be dealing with another East Palestine situation. So here's the headline: Train carrying hazardous materials derails in rural Maine. Residents warned to, quote, stay clear. So this happened in Rockwood, Maine, and people are saying that they can see the fire from 20 or 30 miles away across the lake. And this fire actually happened on a massive lake that feeds one of the main rivers in Maine. These things always happen on rivers and lakes, don't they? There's always a massive spill into a body of water for some reason, and it doesn't seem like a coincidence. Remember in Minnesota a couple weeks ago, I was talking to my friend about this because he was mind blown that this was allowed to happen. But in Minnesota, there was a radioactive water leak. Okay, tritiated water, radioactive water was leaking out of a nuclear power plant for about a month. And they didn't tell anyone for months. This was like last November to December this happened. And they didn't tell anyone until a couple weeks ago. And hundreds of thousands of gallons of radioactive water was dumped into the Mississippi River at the top of the Mississippi River in Minnesota. It starts up in Minnesota, flows all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. And it had a hundreds of thousands of gallons, bare minimum that they admit, were dumped in of tritiated radioactive water. And it was just no big deal, swept under the rug. And it's always on a body of water. It's always on a massive body of water. So you can see here the train derailment happened in Rockwood, which is right on Moosehead Lake in northern Maine. And Moosehead Lake is actually the mouth and the beginning, or is actually the beginning, sorry about that, of the Kennebec River. So just a major coincidence that happens in Rockwood, right on the lake, dumps into Moosehead Lake, and now it can flow into the Kennebec River that flows all the way down through Maine and heads out near Portland, Maine. All right, and is a major water source and is a major water basin for the state of Maine. The Kennebec River recharges one of the biggest water basins in Maine, and it is now being contaminated with these toxic chemicals, potentially even contaminating your well. This is what's happening in East Palestine, Ohio right now, and scientists were even warning of this. I made a video on this a couple days ago, or last week now, and they were warning how it's going to take years for all of these chemicals to percolate through the soil, and they will just slowly be percolating through the soil and dripping into the aquifer like a coffee filter. It'll just slowly be dripping these toxic chemicals into the aquifer and polluting even our well water. All right, so that's why these rivers and lakes are so important, because they recharge entire water basins that people use for their wells and that are part of the aquifer. And they keep getting poisoned over and over. The Ohio River water basin is a massive one that supplies water and recharges the water for multiple states. All right. This only affects Maine, thankfully, but millions of people are in Maine and they are at risk from being poisoned from these hazardous materials. And they haven't released exactly what they are yet, but you can bet it's going to be nasty. And they're already on fire. Look at this. It's already on fire. It was a bad crash. And these are flammable materials as well. Let's hope it's not a similar situation to East Palestine, Ohio, where these chemicals can turn into dioxins, which are related to Agent Orange, and stay in the environment and stay in fat cells in the human body and animal fat cells for a very, very long time. All right. And you can see here 20, 30 miles away, people are still seeing the smoke. So this is a massive fire. This is not something small, and it's going to pollute the Kennebec River, one of the main rivers in Maine right now. All right. And there's a reason this is happening. They want to control the farmland. They want to control everything. But the key is controlling the farmland. Maine is a very productive farm state. There's a lot of homesteaders and small farms that operate in Maine. It actually might have one of the highest rates of small farms in the country in Maine, and they are poisoning their water, right? So you want to grow organic, pesticide-free food that is great for you and your family. You want to try to grow the most healthy food. Well, good luck, because the water, even from your well, is now potentially poisoned with these chemicals. All right. So you can't get away. This is the key that they want to do. If they can't force you to buy their toxic food and you want to grow your own food, I'm telling you, Maine is huge on stuff like this, on growing your own food. I've checked it out before. There are farm stands all over Maine, and it's a very big thing up there. I've even thought about moving to Maine before, because it's a beautiful state and they are so pro small farm friendly. But how are they going to get rid of these people? They have to poison the water. So even if you grow your own food, it's still poison, because the water is poison and the aquifer is poison. So this is huge that this is happening, and this has already been going on for decades and decades. I just wanted to touch on this really quick, because this is important, and this is something that should be talked about once a week on every prepper channel. Everyone should be bringing this up once a week. Glyphosate, Roundup, it's the most widely used herbicide in the nation. All right. It is used to kill weeds, and is the most, just millions and millions, potentially billions of gallons are dumped on our soil every single year in the US. Think about that. Think about that percolating into our aquifer, just like these other chemicals. And look at this study out of CNN. Even CNN's admitting this. Common weed killer glyphosate increases cancer risk by 41%, study says. There are all these lawsuits for glyphosate. There are Hodgkin's lymphoma links to it, cancer links to it. All of these things are linked to glyphosate, and it is the most widely used herbicide in the country, and millions of acres of farmland are being sprayed with it every single year, polluting our waterways. There's tons of runoff, polluting our lakes, polluting our rivers, polluting our aquifers, and it increases cancer by 41%, not 4%. Not something that's like, okay, maybe it's just a fluke. 41%, that's almost 50%. You almost have a 50% higher risk of cancer interacting with glyphosate, and it's sprayed on everything. The food we eat has it in it. The roots absorb the glyphosate into it, suck it up through the water. These things, these chemicals are everywhere, and we are constantly being sprayed and poisoned. We are being sprayed in the skies, sprayed in the water, sprayed in the ground. All of these things are constantly being sprayed and poisoned with chemicals, and it is a slow kill. That is what we are dealing with right now. Is just a soft kill, right? Where you are just poisoned constantly through the food, through the water, and you don't really notice it, and it happens over a very long timeline. So it's hard to pinpoint blame. It's hard to figure out, oh, was it glyphosate, or was it this other thing, or was it genetic, or was it some other thing you're exposed to? That is the goal, to slowly expose you constantly to poisons and implement a soft kill depopulation agenda. And who owns all this farmland? All right, we know Bill Gates is the largest farmland owner in the United States, and look at the places where he owns farmland. Look at these 3 states right here. Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio owns massive amounts of farmland, and these 3 states have been getting hit constantly with industrial accidents, poisonings, derailments, everything, just constantly. What are the odds that that happens, that Bill Gates owns some of the most land in these states out of anyone, and they are constantly being hit and poisoned? And I'm not blaming him directly, but there are groups and there are people that want to take over America's food supply. Because if you control the food, if you control the water, you can control the population. If the population is so poisoned and so in the clouds, out of it, dumbed down, fat and lazy, then they are easier to control. They are easier to take over. Their minds are clouded and their minds are poisoned with these chemicals, with these radio frequencies, these EMFs, these electromagnetic frequencies. All of these things are polluting us. And how do they have control? By doing that, by disabling us and by taking over the food supply and the farmland. That's why he's the biggest farmland owner in the United States, and that's why these states keep getting hit. Just a major coincidence. And he just magically owns 1 acre in New Mexico as well. That's kind of creepy if you ask me. Why does he need to own 1 acre in New Mexico? Very strange, very weird. Probably some weird tax loophole thing, but it's creepy and it's dystopian because he pushes stuff like this. Look at this. Bill Gates, quote, "Rich nations should shift entirely to synthetic beef." That is the idea that he is pushing, and he's been pushing this since 2021. So it's just all these things are randomly occurring. It's not an agenda. It's not being implemented, where they have all this fake synthetic meat that they are pushing. And then he's the biggest farmland owner, and then all of the farmland is being poisoned and being hit with toxic explosions. And the reason why he owns all this farmland, these are family farms that have been bought up. They've been bought out. They couldn't afford it. They had to sell the farm, and he swoops in and takes over these farms. They want to make all the farmland, all the water, everything so poisoned, so expensive that you are forced to eat this lab-grown meat. It's the only option you have is to eat this lab meat because it's the only thing that's not completely riddled with dioxins or plastic chemicals or whatever else they want to dump on us today. This is their plan. It's just like with the AI that I was talking about before, how they want to make things so hellish that people will openly opt in to being in these alternate realities like the metaverse, okay? They will openly just put their body in an AI alternate reality. They will upload their consciousness to it, whatever. They will do all these things because life will just be so hard, so stressful, so unaffordable, so hellish, so poisonous that this is the only option that looks like anything besides dystopia to them, all right? And it's the same thing for the food. They want to make the food so hellish, so expensive. Think about how much it's gone up just in the past couple years, okay? Think of the scarcity you see. It's like, yeah, everything might be there, but compared to the abundance that we had 5 years ago, where there were just stacked shelves, there were giant pyramids of crackers and things like this all over the grocery stores, every grocery store you went in, stacked, all right? Now it's, yeah, the shelves might be, they're full, there's no gaps, but the aisles are way more spread out. All right, there's less aisles. There's less options. Some of your favorite stuff that you got 5 years ago just doesn't exist anymore. It's not a product anymore. This is what they're implementing, and it's a slow motion collapse, and they're going to make things so expensive, so hellish, so poisoned that the only alternative is to eat their even more poisoned meat. And don't even get me started on this fake meat, because I was ranting on this the other day, how it is made with human cancer cells, a lot of it. Not all of it, but a lot of it is made with human cancer cells. A woman named Henrietta Lacks, and her cells are the immortal cell line. Go look up immortal cell line. And it's the basis of almost all genetic modern science is Henrietta Lacks and her cancer cell line. She has an immortal cancer cell line. She died 75 years ago, and they still use her cancer cells to grow flesh and things like this, grow different things in lab settings with her cancer cells. And it's human cells that they use to grow a lot of this food. This is all completely real. And I don't want to rant on this too much because I had like a 10-minute rant on it a couple videos ago. But it's very dystopian what they're setting up, and this is why. Because you won't just openly accept this. Nobody's going to openly just say, yeah, like I want to eat this BS junk that's made in a lab. How is this appetizing to anyone? I really don't understand. Maybe it's interesting, but it doesn't seem appetizing. I can see somebody eating it out of interest, curiosity, but I cannot see anyone actually wanting to eat it because it is supposed to taste amazing and supposed to be healthy for you or something like that. This is setting us up for the dystopia, and we are only going to have this option very soon. Just like all the bug pushes, eating bugs, okay? This is already being implemented in our food. There are tons of chidin derivatives in our food right now, and humans cannot digest chidin. And that is the very hard shell protein that makes up bugs' exoskeleton. All right, they have an exoskeleton, their skeleton's on their outside. You know how bugs are kind of crunchy, they're kind of hard. That exoskeleton's made of chitin. It's like their bones, and humans cannot digest chitin. It's actually very toxic to them, and it actually can cut up their intestines because it is not digestible. Only things like birds and other animals that have gizzards where they can grind up the bugs with rocks and things like that, they have to be ground up to be digestible by even animals, even birds and things like that. But humans do not have that. They only have stomach acid. They don't have any kind of gizzard or things like that to grind it up, okay? So there's no way for humans to digest this chitin, and it is actually very toxic. It can build up and can actually cause micro cuts in your intestine line, okay? So this is it's already in the food supply. I've seen it in food ingredients all over the place, these very specific codes, and they're just called like E41. It's very innocuous. You don't even know it's like, oh, E41, it must be food coloring or something. No, it is a chidin derivative. They're already putting food proteins, food coloring from insects in our food supply right now. All right. They're putting nano particles in our food supply as well. This has been approved by the FDA to put nano technology, like nano titanium has been approved by the FDA to put in our food supply. And this is a brand new world we're dealing with too, brave new world we're dealing with too, is ingesting nanoparticles. Our body has never interacted with these particles before, and there's no telling what the accumulation of nanoparticles will be, or the penetration, the absorption of what they will be. They might be able to penetrate cell membranes and absorb directly into cells, these nanoparticles, nanotitanium, and permeate membranes very easily because the particles are so small. And these nanoparticles also can't even be caught by some of the smallest micron water filters as well. So once they just get in the food supply, once they get out there, they can't even be filtered out of the water or the food supply as well. So all these things are being unleashed on us at once on purpose. I made a whole video a couple months ago about other stuff that's going on in our food supply as well, and I got a strike for it. The video got banned, and I still have a warning up on top of my channel for it, all right, because I was talking about something else even crazier happening to our food supply and how it's being poisoned. All right, I can't talk about it, obviously, but there is a lot of stuff going on, and it is not a coincidence, and you guys need to be getting prepared. You need to be learning how to grow your food. You need to stock up on seeds. Seeds can be used as an alternative currency source. You can trade them. You can grow food with them. You can do anything with them. And you can even eat them, all right? Certain seeds, if you need to, in a survival situation, just eat the seeds, okay? So get stocked up on these things now. Learn how to grow your own food now. That's going to be the only option very soon, is to not give them any of your money, not pay for their poisoned products, and to just have your own, is to opt out. And if you don't give them money, they will fall. They won't be able to afford to put nano titanium into the food supply. They won't have the money for it. They won't have the money to just put all these extra poisons into our food supply. They won't have the money because we won't be supporting them. We will be growing our own food. So that is the key, and that's why they are trying to take out our water supplies, poison our water supplies, poison our airs, poison our land, so we don't even have the option to grow our own food. And the only thing you can do is eat this synthetic lab meat. All right, get your ration, get your Soylent Green. All right, that's essentially what we're lining ourselves up for here. So make sure you guys get prepared. Please hit it up down there. Hit up all that stuff if you want to support the channel. I'm super grateful for anything you do. Thank you guys so much, and I hope you have a big old blessed day.